right next to the selection tool, there's a little white arrow, which is called the direct selection tool. And this is basically selects pieces of a graphic. So let's see, let's go back to your selection tool and select your rectangle. The rectangle is made up of 4 points with 4 lines, right? And each point on the corner is called an anchor point. Let's see, I'm actually going to select it with this one so that you can see it a little bit better. Do you see these blue boxes on the corners? Those are called anchor points. And you can see when I hover over one, it actually says anchor. So when you use the normal selection tool, you're selecting a whole object and all of its anchor points. When you use this white arrow, it gives you the flexibility to select individual anchor points or individual lines. So if I hover over this and click on this anchor point, all of a sudden I can manipulate this one point in and of itself. Same thing with the shift constrain. If you hit shift, oops, let me undo that. Go back to my, if I hit shift and move this, I can constrain it to the vertical or the horizontal so that I know that it's in line with those other anchor points. And then the other piece too is if you click on the line, you can actually manipulate the line between the anchor points as well. Actually, I'll do this. Okay, so the other thing you can do with the individual anchor points is, let's say I need a triangle, I can create a square. I mean, there's easier ways to do this, but I can create a square and then delete one of the anchor points, and then there's a triangle. Basically, since you've taken out that anchor point, it deletes the point itself plus the lines that are connected to it. So you can manipulate individual pieces of an object that way as well. If we go back to our regular selection tool and just click on any one of the objects here, you can go to Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste, and it'll basically paste it anywhere on the document. You can also use the keyboard shortcuts, which are Command-C and Command-V for paste. Similar thing with the direct selection tool. So let's say I take this direct selection tool and I pick only one of the anchors. Just like when I deleted it, it deleted the one anchor and the 2 lines next to it. If you hit Control-C and Control-V, it's going to copy the 1 point plus the 2 lines that are attached to it. Let's see. Oh, and then when you click on this, with the direct selection tool, you'll see you have your 4 corner points, and there actually is one blue point in the center. If you ever select the center point of an object, it's kind of like using the normal selection tool. You'll be able to move the whole object on its own. And so that's useful if you are editing specific anchor points, but for some reason you need to move the whole object somewhere. You don't want to bother switching tools. You can just hit the center point and move it. Let's see. The other good thing about the direct selection tool is that this raw attenuation curve I mentioned is made up of a bunch of different objects. If you click in here, you can actually catch individual individual anchor points within this grouped object. There's also, if you click and hold on this direct selection tool, you'll note that there's something that's called a group selection tool. And what that will do is that will, let me zoom in on this so that you can see this. This graph is made up of a bunch of lines, circles, etc. If I use the direct selection tool and I click on one of these circles, I'm only catching one anchor point. You'll see, let me move this. I'm only catching one anchor point of that circle. If I want to select the whole circle within the group, I can go to this group selection tool and then select the circle, and it's going to automatically select all 4 of those. So that gives me a little bit more flexibility to move particular objects within groups of objects. Speaking of groups, let's talk about how to, did I already go through grouping objects? No, right. Okay, if you go back to your normal selection tool, click on your box, hold the shift key down, and then click on the figure 8. That's going to select both of the items. If you go up to Object and click on Group, and you'll see there's a shortcut here, which is Command-G. If you click on that, what that does is it sets those together in a group. So now if you click off of it and click back on, you'll see that it automatically selects both, right? And you can move them around together. Now, like I was saying before, if you take the direct select tool, you can click on any individual anchor point within that group. But if you go to the group selection tool and click on the box, you're automatically going to get the that one object of the 2. Does that kind of make sense? All right. Okay, so let's do a quick save as. So if you go to File, because saving frequently is very important when you're creating any kind of graphics. So if you go to Save As, you'll get a dialog box. You can rename your file. You can tell it where to go. And then down here in the format, you can choose between a bunch of different vector formats. I'd go ahead and save this as Adobe Illustrator for now. A lot of other documents can't read Adobe Illustrator files, so you would normally want to save it as an EPS if you're going to plug it into a different document. So go ahead and save that so that you have it somewhere with any beautiful changes that you've made. So we talked about grouping objects. I forgot to tell you how to ungroup objects, which would be really useful. So let's say you click and drag over a couple of objects, which will select both of them, or you can select and shift select. You can use Command or Control G to group them, which then means you will be able to move them together. And then if you hit Shift Command G or Shift Control G, then that's going to ungroup them. Okay. Every so often I'm entering this weird mode where everything behind it dims. That's called isolation mode, and that's useful if you have groups of objects and you want to work just on that group of objects and you don't want anything else on the artboard to be affected. So this, for example, these are grouped right now. If I double click on this, then all of a sudden everything else is dimmed, so I can't actually select or move anything else behind this. I can only move what's in here. And so this, now I can move these things without worrying about touching other items. So, all right. The other thing I was going to say is that we talked about copying and pasting, where you can do Command C to copy and then Command V to paste, or you can do it through your edit, right? Copy and paste in here. You have some other options too. Sometimes it's nice, you want to paste something directly on top, let's say because you want to line it up. So let's say I wanted a second circle that's you know, exactly the same size shape, but that's just moved over a little bit. So what you can do is you can Command C to copy, and then if you go to edit, you can paste in front, which will paste the second object directly in front of your first object. You can paste it in the back, which would obviously paste in the back, or paste in place. Let's say you have 10 objects all stacked up on one another, and you have something that's in the middle. If you paste in place, it'll basically put it right next or right on top of that one. So it's in the middle of the stack, but it's right next to the other one. Another really easy way to do this actually is if you select your object and click Option, you can see that I have two little arrows now, and that basically says whatever you do with this now, I'm going to duplicate it. So if I click and drag this, this circle now, I've created a second circle. So what I can do here is I can Option click, which is going to duplicate it, and then Shift to constrain my proportions and move it to the side, and then I have a nice circle that is in the same plane, right? All right. And let's say I wanted to do 100 circles. I could keep doing the copy, paste, move, copy, paste, move, copy, paste, move. That would take forever. So the other thing I can do is I can copy, so hit Command C, and since the very last thing that I did was move it, there's a shortcut that's duplicate, which is Command D, and what that does is it basically it duplicates your very last move before your copy. You're nodding, you're like, I can see the utility of this. So then if I duplicate this again, oops, you see that all I'm hitting is Command D right now, and it's basically copying the object and moving it at the same time. Just kind of a shortcut. And that one takes a little playing around with to figure out.
Just Command C?
Command C will copy. Mm-hmm. And then did you move it already, or?
Now I moved it.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've copied it and you've moved it, right? So if you hit Command D now, it'll probably just move it, right?
Yeah.
So what you want to do is if you want to do both of them, you have to hit Command C and then edit, paste in front, and then Command D.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? Because you have to copy it, paste it, and then move it. But then once all that's done, if you hit Command C for copy and Command D, that'll copy it and then move it the same distance that you've moved it before.
Okay.